Hi, everyone. My name is Randy Marchani. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Virginia Tech. And today we're going to do a little introduction to Virginia Tech's policies 7000 and 7025. The 7000 policy is commonly known as the acceptable use statement. But what I wanted to show you first is to give you a little bit of an idea of the scenario and the atmosphere that we have here at Virginia Tech. We recently did a survey of all of the university-owned assets. That's the smaller pie graph that you see on the left there. And basically what we're trying to do is to rank order these things by the type of data that's stored on those devices. We'll talk a little bit later in other videos about low risk, high risk data, moderate risk data. But I wanted to give you an idea of the types of machines and the number of machines that we have out there. Roughly, we have about 40, looks like about 47, 48,000 Virginia Tech owned devices. And this is certainly not all of the ones that are on the Virginia Tech network. But if you notice in there, the little red pie chart slice, basically those are the number of Virginia Tech owned devices that were reported by the organizational units such as yours that had stored high risk data. And high risk data, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but basically that's data that you want to make sure that you protect. On the right-hand side, we see sort of a distribution of what type of high-risk data is being stored in those 4,500 and plus machines. Everything from being critical to the university, social security numbers, PHI, protected health information, student records, FERPA, that turns out to be the biggest thing that you see here, the majority of information that is stored on those devices. And we go down a little bit down the line. The interesting stat, of course, is the critical to the university. That's basically machines that are, if they go down, they will cause a serious impact on the operation of the university. But I just wanted to give you an idea of the types of machines that are out there in terms of the data that they got. Okay? So where do we find these policies? This URL here is a nice little shortcut to all of the IT policies that the university has. It's a little bit of an eye exam here, but basically we have the acceptable use categories, we have security and data protection categories, we have identity management categories, and data administration and transparency. In each of these little category sections, we have the policies, and then we have the accompanying standards that go with these policies. But you can find all of this in a readable format at this URL that you see here. This is just a subset of all of the university policies that are out there. This is just for the IT related policies, the ones that are mostly in the 7,000 range. So policy 7,000. This is what we also known as the acceptable use policy. This is the policy that defines what the university considers to be acceptable behavior on the internet. And one thing that I just wanted to point out here is that the university does regard any violations of these policies as a serious offense. Some of the laws and regulations, but not all of them, are mentioned in this enforcement section. But really the thing to look at is that second sentence where we say here that the disciplinary action is defined in either the undergraduate or graduate student honor codes and the student and faculty and staff handbooks. So any prescriptive policies would be defined in those documents there. But nonetheless, we want to make sure that you understand that any of these violations of this policy and the standards is considered to be serious. We look at the acceptable use standard, and here we have some examples, and it's kind of broken into two pieces. The first piece says stuff that you must do. And the very most important one of them all is this very first one here, where it says that you're supposed to use the resources only for authorized purposes. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that because a new development has popped up that's come down from the state government with regard to TikTok and its accompanying apps. But basically, using Virginia Tech-owned resources for authorized purposes only. You want to protect your user ID and system from unauthorized use. You are responsible for any activities that originate from any of your user ID on university systems. So keep that in mind. And again, acceptable use is defined as to access data or systems that you have been given permission to access. You have the usual stuff with copyrighted software, and be careful about how you don't monopolize resources and keep other people from using them for their own business purposes. There are a few other items, for instance, but I just wanted to give you an overview of some of the things that are out there in terms of how you must use the resources. For those that work with the negative side of the house, here are things that you must not do. And the key thing in the first bullet item there is you must not use another person's system, user ID, password, files, or data without their permission. That's the key phrase there. Don't try to circumvent network or security measures. You can see some of the other things in there. One of the ones I like to remind people is to not use email to harass or intimidate other people, whether they're in the university community or not. This slide here just has some of the items that show up in the back half of that acceptable use standard. Well, I mentioned TikTok, and so I wanted to bring this to your attention. State law was passed that will go into effect effective July 1st of 2023. And basically it requires all state agencies, including Virginia Tech, to cease the use of the TikTok application or any other applications developed by the Chinese-owned companies ByteDance or Tencent for any official university purposes. And in addition to that, you must not have those applications installed on any Virginia Tech owned machine or use your personal device on the Virginia Tech networks. So the prohibition is for the apps to be installed or used on Virginia Tech owned machines or any use, whether it's personal or not, on using the Virginia Tech network. Those are expressly forbidden by Virginia state law. Some of the other apps that are put out by these companies are shown here, but more importantly, that URL that you see here on this slide is a frequently asked questions on the TikTok ban. It will have more answers to your questions, and if you don't have satisfactory answers, you can certainly contact my office. So I wanted to bring this to your attention. This is something that the university does have some TikTok accounts, and basically they're going to go into into idle mode. They're not going to be used for now. A lot of people sometimes think this was a university restriction. I want to emphasize again, this is a new state law passed by the Virginia legislature. So we have an incident. What do we do? Security.vt.edu is our office website, and in one of the pull down menus that you see there, it says incident response, and it has report an incident. When you click on that report an incident, you'll see a little bit of information there, as you see on the screen, and there's a link there that says to report the incident here. When you click on that report, it'll give you some general guidelines, but most importantly, disconnect your machine from the network. Don't power it off necessarily, but at least disconnect it from the network. And don't use any system that you suspect has been compromised there. And again, there may be confidential issues in there. You certainly want to notify your dean, since you're a department head, and perhaps the campus police if you feel there's a physical threat, and certainly my office, the information technology office. When you get to this page, if you look over here on the right-hand side, there's a request this service button, and when you click on that, you'll get a form that looks something like this. And here it will automatically pre-fill some of these fields based on your login. And basically, it's going to ask you what happened, what types of data. And you notice that we talk about the types of data that that may be on those machines that be compromised. This, when you complete this form, this will submit a trouble ticket through our ServiceNow system, and my office and any other appropriate entities will be notified of the event, and you'll be contacted by one of us about whatever the incident is. So that's the quick and dirty on the acceptable use statement. You may have noticed that when you read our policies, they tend to be short. They're somewhere between 3 to 5 pages long, and mostly the first 3 pages are the meat of the policies. We like to keep them short and concise. Policy 7025 is more along the GLBA, Federal Trade Commission route. It is safeguarding non-public customer information. This describes the Virginia Tech's plan to implement the FTC's safeguarding standards rule, and personal financial information collected from your students, parents, other third-party entities. These are sources of the data that might be covered by this particular policy, and all of the data that's covered by this policy is considered to be high risk. So what exactly is high risk? Well, remember a little bit earlier, we were talking about that when I showed you that diagram. This is a component of our Virginia Tech risk classifications document. And basically, if you just look here at the high risk section, high risk data is defined as any data that is protection of the data is required by law or regulation or contractual obligations, for instance, a granting agency. And most importantly, and it requires Virginia Tech to self-report either to a government agency or provide notice to any of the individuals affected by inappropriate access of their data. The other number 3 here, that's the loss of confidentiality that you sort of see in a lot of documents. But the real key here is that if it's any data that's covered by law or regulation or contractual obligation, and it requires the university to self-report, that is considered high-risk data. Okay? Moderate risk is shown here, and low risk is shown here as examples. This table is in the Virginia Tech risk classifications document that you can find at the policy site that I showed you at the beginning of this little session. So there are some responsible positions here. My office, in particular, yay, I get to be tagged with this. I'm responsible for ensuring that the implementation of the overall security of any systems that hold non-financial information and infrastructure is protected. We have risk assessment processes. We have data security mandates, threat detection, monitoring, security awareness and training. A lot of this isn't under your control, it's more under mine, but certainly the risk assessment and the data security pieces of that, those are things that you as a department head would be responsible for. Once a year, I have to submit a written report to the Board of Visitors, basically commenting on the overall compliance of assessment for the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act and the Information Security Program. The types of financial activities that are covered by the GLBA are usually done by the Office of Scholarships and Financial Aid and the Office of the University Bursar. That's not to say your department might not have that, but in general, those are the 2 departments that primarily deal with this type of financial activity. Some of the requirements there is you're required to finish complete a business impact analysis and a risk assessment once every 3 years. Section 3.2 of the policy basically gives you a fairly little comprehensive 15, 20 bullet items list of safeguarding practices that you should implement and this includes training your employees. And remember that my office will provide some IT training and security awareness training for your employees. And then section 3.5, well, gives you a little bit of information on what to do if you are suspected that there's been a possible data exposure that was not authorized. So in general, just to give you a nice, description of how we look at policies and standards. Policies in our world, these are high-level direction for dealings with a particular topic. You'll notice that when you read our policies, you may go, well, that doesn't say a lot. It's just kind of high-level stuff. Yes, that's exactly what they're supposed to do. The standards are mandatory steps for implementing the policy and will contain much more detailed information. In some cases, it can go as far as specific steps that you need to do. Okay? And so with this, here's my contact information. Should you need to contact me, my office phone number, my email address there. And so the security office website, the Division of IT, which is the central IT authority here at the university. That's the website there. The main university policy website is policies.vt.edu. So with that, I hope you got some quick overview of these two very important policies. And with that, I'll see you later.